They had been friends since childhood, growing up together in Stuart, Florida. When Trisha Todd and Stephen Williams eventually married, friends and family thought it was the perfect love story. Childhood sweethearts who found their happily ever after. But some fairy tales have dark endings. Behind closed doors, their relationship concealed secrets that would shock everyone who thought they knew this couple. Trisha's own journal would later reveal a truth so disturbing that even Stephen's mother would question his innocence. If you're interested in true crime cases that examine how well we really know the people closest to us, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this important story with others who seek justice for victims. This is the story of how a childhood friendship became a marriage, then a nightmare, and finally a murder that would destroy two families forever. Patricia Gail Todd was born on February 19, 1986 in Stuart, Martin County, Florida. Her parents, David Joseph Todd and Rebecca Jane Todd, raised a daughter who would simply be known as Trisha to everyone who met her. Growing up, Trisha had what those close to her described as a great life growing up with her boys, referring to her tight-knit circle of childhood friends. After graduating from South Fork High School in 2004, Trisha felt called to serve something greater than herself. She made the decision to join the United States Air Force, driven by a deep sense of patriotism and duty to her country. This commitment led her far from her Florida home to deployments in Kuwait and Iraq, where she served with dedication and courage alongside her fellow service members. During her military service, Trisha maintained contact with Stephen, a childhood friend from her hometown. Their friendship had roots stretching back to their youth, creating a foundation of shared memories and experiences. As Trisha navigated the challenges of military life overseas, their regular communication became a source of comfort and connection to home. What neither of them initially recognized was how their long-distance friendship was gradually evolving into something deeper and more romantic. Trisha's character was defined by two fundamental qualities that would shape her entire life: her strong Christian faith and her natural inclination to help others in need. These traits influenced every major decision she made, from her choice to serve in the military to her later career aspirations. Her friends and family consistently described her as someone who put others before herself, always ready to lend a helping hand or offer support to those facing difficulties. But this story of service and dedication would take an unexpected turn when friendship became romance. The transformation of Trisha and Stephen's relationship from childhood friends to romantic partners happened gradually during her military deployment. Neither initially recognized the exact moment when their friendship crossed the line into love, but their regular communication while she served overseas created an emotional intimacy that eventually blossomed into romance. When Trisha returned from her service, they decided to take their relationship to the next level, believing they had found the perfect foundation for marriage: marrying one's best friend. Their union seemed blessed when they welcomed their daughter Faith into the world. Faith represented hope and new beginnings for the couple, a beautiful symbol of their love and commitment to building a family together. For a time, it appeared they had achieved the fairy tale ending that many couples dream of: childhood sweethearts who found lasting love and created a family. However, as Trisha would later reflect, life isn't a fairy tale, and not all stories have happy endings. After more than 10 years together, cracks began appearing in their seemingly perfect marriage. Problems that had perhaps been simmering beneath the surface began emerging with increasing frequency and intensity. The couple found themselves facing challenges that tested the strength of their long friendship and romantic bond. These marital difficulties ultimately proved insurmountable, leading to their decision to separate after 11 years of being together. Despite the end of their marriage, they initially maintained what appeared to be a friendly relationship, particularly focusing on co-parenting their daughter Faith. This amicable arrangement seemed to suggest that their deep friendship might survive even though their marriage could not. Following her divorce, Trisha made the significant decision to transition out of military service and relocate to Hobe Sound, Florida, with Faith. Drawing on her Christian faith and desire to help others, she pursued a career in nursing, eventually earning her degree from Central Carolina Tech College. She secured employment as a hospice nurse at Treasure Coast Hospice, where she could combine her medical training with her natural compassion to care for patients and families during difficult times. Yet beneath this seemingly amicable arrangement, darker forces were already beginning to emerge. What friends and family never suspected was the disturbing reality behind Stephen and Trisha's relationship, a truth that would only come to light through evidence found in Trisha's personal journal. In these private writings, Trisha documented experiences that revealed Stephen's true character, a side of him that remained completely hidden from those who knew them as childhood friends. The journal entries painted a horrifying picture of abuse that had occurred throughout their relationship. Perhaps most shocking was the revelation that Stephen had actually kicked Tricia in the stomach while she was pregnant with Faith. This act of violence against both Tricia and their unborn child demonstrated a level of cruelty that none of their friends or family members had ever witnessed or suspected during their years together. Tricia's writings revealed that Stephen had gradually transformed from the person she thought she knew into someone she genuinely feared. The man who had been her childhood friend and the father of her child had become a source of terror in her life. Her journal documented how Stephen's behavior had escalated over time, showing a pattern of control and intimidation that extended far beyond physical violence. One of the most disturbing examples of Stephen's psychological cruelty was his deliberate targeting of things that brought Tricia joy. According to her journal, Stephen had strangled and killed two of Tricia's beloved dogs, acts of violence that served no purpose other than to hurt her emotionally. This behavior demonstrated his desire to destroy anything that made Tricia happy, revealing a level of malicious intent that went beyond typical domestic disputes. Even Stephen's own mother recognized the dangerous trajectory of her son's mindset. She later recalled conversations where Stephen had expressed his wish for Tricia to simply disappear from their lives entirely. When Tricia actually went missing, Stephen's mother confronted him directly about his potential involvement. Her statement to investigators revealed her own suspicions. "I said, 'Did you have anything to do with that?' And he said, 'No, I ain't have nothing to do with that.' I don't believe." The evidence in Tricia's journal and Stephen's own family's concerns painted a clear picture of a man whose hatred had grown so intense that he wanted Tricia to disappear entirely from their lives. By April 2016, Stephen's dark fantasies were about to become a horrifying reality. The events that would lead to tragedy began on April 26, 2016, when Stephen drove down from his military base in North Carolina to visit his daughter Faith. Following what appeared to be their standard custody arrangement, Stephen booked accommodations at a local Airbnb, seemingly preparing for a routine parental visit. Those around them had no reason to suspect that this visit would be anything other than another normal custody exchange between divorced parents. Tricia's daily routine on April 27, 2016, began like any other day. Her established pattern involved picking up Faith from the babysitter before heading to her job as a hospice nurse at Treasure Coast Hospice. This routine was so consistent and reliable that when it was broken, people immediately recognized something was seriously wrong. Tricia was known for her responsibility and dependability, qualities that made her absence particularly alarming to those who knew her well. When April 27th arrived and Tricia failed to pick up Faith from the babysitter and didn't show up for work, concerns spread quickly among her family and colleagues. Phone calls began circulating as people tried to locate her, each conversation adding to the growing worry about her whereabouts. The fact that Tricia would simply disappear without explanation was completely contrary to her character and established patterns of behavior. Tricia's family members didn't waste time making excuses or assuming she would eventually show up. Instead, they took immediate action and went directly to her house to check on her personally. What they discovered there would confirm their worst fears that something terrible had happened to their beloved daughter and sister. Upon arriving at Tricia's residence, her family found a scene that appeared normal at first glance. The lights were on throughout the house, and groceries were still sitting out on the counter, as if she had recently returned from a shopping trip and been interrupted while putting them away. However, both Tricia and her car were conspicuously missing from the property, creating an eerie sense that she had simply vanished mid-task. The family conducted a thorough search of the immediate area around Tricia's house, looking for any clues about where she might have gone. During this search, they eventually discovered her car parked across the street from her residence, in a location where she would never normally park. Initially, they had missed the vehicle because they were focused on finding Tricia herself and wouldn't have expected her car to be positioned in such an unusual spot. When family members examined the car more closely, they made a discovery that eliminated any remaining hope that Tricia had left voluntarily. Inside the vehicle, they found her purse and keys still in the ignition, personal items that she would never have left behind if she had chosen to go somewhere of her own accord. The discovery of Tricia's abandoned car was just the beginning of an investigation that would reveal a carefully planned and executed murder. Police investigators immediately began reviewing available surveillance footage to trace Tricia's final hours. CCTV cameras captured her shopping and returning home on April 27, 2016, providing the last confirmed sighting of Tricia alive. These recordings became crucial evidence in establishing a timeline of events leading up to her disappearance and eventual murder. As investigators gathered information about Tricia's personal life, they quickly learned about Stephen's presence in the Hobe Sound area for his custody visit with Faith. Given his role as Faith's father and his proximity to the scene during the relevant time frame, Stephen became an immediate person of interest in the investigation. Detectives approached him for questioning to understand his activities during the critical period. When initially interviewed, Stephen provided what seemed like a straightforward and cooperative account of his interactions with Tricia. He explained that Tricia had visited him and Faith at their Airbnb rental but had left after spending some time with them. According to Stephen's statement, Tricia said she would return the following morning to pick up Faith for their regular custody exchange. When she failed to appear as planned, Stephen claimed he was forced to leave Faith with a babysitter due to his work obligations requiring his return to North Carolina. Stephen also offered what appeared to be helpful information about Tricia's possible whereabouts. He suggested to investigators that Tricia might have gone for one of her solitary beach walks, an activity that others confirmed she genuinely enjoyed and engaged in regularly. This suggestion initially seemed like valuable insight from someone who knew Tricia's habits and preferences well. Following Stephen's lead, police investigators pursued the beach walk theory extensively. They identified and reviewed surveillance footage from local beaches, eventually locating and interviewing a man who had been seen on camera speaking with someone matching Tricia's description. However, this potential lead was quickly eliminated when the man was thoroughly investigated and cleared of any suspicion. He had simply been watching sea turtles lay eggs on the beach, a completely innocent activity. The breakthrough in the case came when investigators conducted a more thorough examination of available CCTV footage from the area. This detailed review revealed Stephen driving both his own vehicle and Tricia's car during the night of her disappearance, directly contradicting his earlier statements to police about his activities and whereabouts. Confronted with this compelling video evidence, Stephen attempted to provide an explanation for his suspicious behavior. He claimed he had obtained gasoline for Tricia's car because it was running low on fuel, suggesting he was simply being helpful to his ex-wife. However, investigators had already determined that Tricia's car was discovered the following morning with an almost empty gas tank, completely contradicting Stephen's fabricated explanation about refueling it. As evidence continued mounting against Stephen and his explanations became increasingly implausible, police arrested him on May 24, 2016. But Stephen's arrest was just the beginning. His interrogation would reveal a web of lies and ultimately expose the horrifying truth about Tricia's final hours. Stephen's first interrogation began with his complete denial of any involvement in Tricia's disappearance. He maintained his innocence steadfastly, claiming to have no knowledge of what had happened to his ex-wife after she allegedly left the Airbnb following their visit. However, as investigators presented mounting evidence and pressed him with increasingly direct questions, Stephen's carefully constructed story began to crumble under scrutiny. Faced with contradictory evidence, Stephen shifted to a second version of events that was dramatically different from his initial account. In this new story, he claimed to have returned to his Airbnb room after allegedly going to Tricia's house to retrieve her laptop at her specific request. According to this version, when he arrived back at the rental property, he discovered Tricia lying unconscious on the floor for reasons he could not explain. Stephen described panicking upon finding Tricia in this condition, claiming he believed she was somehow setting him up for a frame job or attempting to create a compromising situation. Rather than calling for medical assistance or emergency services, he claimed to have made the decision to transport her unconscious body using her own vehicle. He described driving to what he called a random location, where he left her with her cell phone in case she needed to call someone for help. Detective Card, who was leading the interrogation, became increasingly frustrated with Stephen's constantly changing narrative and obvious fabrications. Her persistence in questioning revealed the logical inconsistencies in his account. During one particularly intense exchange, she stated, "Stephen, I know you're tired, and I'm tired too. If things happened the way you said it happened, then there's really no reason why you shouldn't just take us to her." Detective Card systematically dismantled Stephen's story by pointing out the contradictions between his claimed panic and his calculated actions. She noted how he was thinking straight enough to change your clothes, thinking straight enough to go back and clean up, and thinking straight enough to send that BS text the next morning just to cover your steps. Her analysis revealed that Stephen's behavior demonstrated careful planning rather than panic-driven decisions. The detective's conclusion was direct and uncompromising. "The only reason you would not take us to a body is because she didn't die the way you're explaining." This statement cut through Stephen's elaborate deceptions and focused on the fundamental issue. If events had occurred as innocently as he claimed, he would have no reason to conceal Tricia's location. When Detective Michael Oliver joined the interrogation, he employed a different strategy that focused on understanding the emotional dynamics between Stephen and Tricia. Oliver's more sympathetic approach allowed Stephen to elaborate on their relationship problems, particularly focusing on recurring conflicts about money and custody arrangements. Through this technique, Oliver extracted more detailed responses about the financial pressures Stephen felt regarding child support obligations. Eventually, under sustained pressure from both detectives, Stephen provided a partial confession that involved an argument about child support that allegedly became physical, resulting in Tricia falling and hitting her head. However, even this confession was clearly sanitized and incomplete, avoiding the most crucial details about what actually happened during their final confrontation. Yet even this partial admission was far from the complete truth. The full horror of what Stephen had done would only emerge through continued pressure and investigation. Detective Oliver employed a masterful psychological strategy to break down Stephen's remaining defenses and extract the truth about Tricia's murder. He began with an hour-long monologue designed to make Stephen feel understood and emotionally safe enough to reveal what actually happened during their final encounter. This approach required patience and psychological insight to create an environment where Stephen might finally tell the complete truth. Oliver's technique involved empathetically addressing Stephen's stated frustrations about their custody arrangement and the challenges of dealing with a demanding child during nighttime visits. He validated Stephen's feelings about these stressful situations, while simultaneously creating an atmosphere where honesty seemed like the safer option than continued deception and fabrication. The detective's key psychological insight was pointing out to Stephen that the truth is never anywhere near as bad as what people will believe if you let them come up with their own story. This approach was designed to convince Stephen that providing an honest account would actually benefit him rather than further incriminate him in the investigation. Under this sustained psychological pressure and empathetic approach, Stephen finally began providing more detailed information about the fatal argument with Tricia. He described how their discussion about child support obligations had escalated when Tricia physically positioned herself to block his attempts to leave the Airbnb. Stephen claimed he felt trapped and unable to depart from the increasingly heated conversation. According to Stephen's account during this confession, he was attempting to de-escalate the tense situation and couldn't find a way out of the confrontation. He repeatedly emphasized that he couldn't even just leave because of Tricia's physical positioning and her insistence on continuing their argument about financial responsibilities and custody arrangements. Stephen described the fatal moment as occurring when he tried to move Tricia away from blocking his path to the door. In his version of events, she slipped and she hit her head during this physical interaction. He insisted this outcome was completely accidental, stating emphatically, "I didn't mean for that. That wasn't my freaking fault." The confession included Stephen's description of his panic following Tricia's fatal injury. He explained his fear by referencing previous incidents where Tricia had blown things up for no reason, suggesting he was worried about being blamed for something he claimed was an accident. This fear, according to Stephen, motivated his subsequent actions to conceal what had happened. However, even this more detailed confession contained obvious inconsistencies and omissions that investigators immediately recognized. When pressed about the specific location where he had disposed of Tricia's body, Stephen continued claiming he couldn't remember because he was going so fast and was too scared to pay attention to his surroundings during the disposal. Detectives pointed out the fundamental contradiction in Stephen's account. He claimed to be too panicked and scared to remember where he drove, yet he was coherent enough to clean up evidence, change his clothes, and send covering text messages the following day. The interrogation concluded with Detective Oliver's emotional appeal focusing on Faith's need for closure and Stephen's responsibility as her only surviving parent. The detective pleaded directly, "You need to give her mother back to her. Show your daughter right that you took us to her mother." Stephen's agreement to help locate Tricia's body would reveal the true extent of his calculated brutality and the shocking premeditation behind her murder. Stephen's eventual complete confession revealed the true extent of his premeditated plan and exposed his earlier statements as elaborate fabrications designed to minimize his culpability. Contrary to his story of an accidental death during a spontaneous argument, the reality was that Stephen had traveled to Hobe Sound with the specific intention of murdering Tricia, making this a carefully planned and executed crime. The confession revealed that Stephen's actual plan involved much more than simply killing Tricia. He intended to obtain her email password so he could send messages to her family, friends, and employer, indicating that she was permanently leaving the area. This digital deception was designed to prevent people from immediately searching for her, and to provide Stephen with time to complete his disposal plan without interference from concerned relatives or law enforcement. Stephen's account of the murder timeline showed calculated preparation rather than spontaneous violence. When Tricia initially dropped Faith off with him at the Airbnb, he wasn't yet prepared to execute his plan. However, when she left to return home, he realized this represented his best opportunity, and that it was now or never to carry out the murder he had been contemplating. Stephen called Tricia back to the Airbnb under some false pretext, and when she returned unsuspecting, he immediately knocked her unconscious with a deliberate blow. Rather than the accident he had claimed during interrogation, this was the beginning of a prolonged and torturous ordeal that Stephen had planned in advance. The most chilling aspect of Stephen's confession was his revelation that he waited for Tricia to regain consciousness, specifically so he could demand her email password. When Tricia awakened and realized the danger she was in, she began screaming for help, which frustrated Stephen, who was concerned about being overheard by neighbors or other guests at the rental property. In his anger at Tricia's screams and his long-standing hatred toward her, Stephen made the calculated decision to punch her with enough force to kill her. This wasn't a momentary loss of control or an accidental death. It was a deliberate act of murder committed while their 2-year-old daughter Faith was sleeping in the adjacent room. Stephen's disposal plan demonstrated extensive premeditation that contradicted every aspect of his earlier claims about panic and spontaneous decisions. He had already identified and prepared a burial site at the John C. and Marjorie Jones Hungerland Wildlife and Environmental Area, located across Martin and Palm Beach counties. The remote location had been selected specifically because it offered concealment from public view. After placing Tricia's body in a trash bag, Stephen transported her to this pre-selected burial site using her own vehicle. However, his plan extended beyond simple burial. Stephen had purchased a chainsaw in North Carolina, specifically for dismembering Tricia's body to prevent identification if remains were ever discovered. His methodical approach included removing Tricia's teeth and fingerprints to eliminate the possibility of forensic identification. Stephen then cut up her body and attempted to dissolve the remains in a prepared tub of acid, demonstrating a level of premeditation and callousness that shocked even experienced investigators. The confession revealed that Stephen's motive was entirely about control and revenge rather than any legitimate custody concerns. He killed Tricia to gain full custody of Faith, not because he particularly wanted the responsibility of caring for his daughter, but because he wanted to permanently remove her from Tricia's life. Stephen had explicitly told Tricia he was sick of her treating him badly and asking for money to take care of Faith, and decided that murder was his preferred solution to these perceived problems. As Tricia's family learned these horrific details, they faced the devastating reality of what had happened to their beloved daughter and mother. Following Stephen's complete confession and his agreement to lead authorities to Tricia's remains, legal proceedings moved forward with his acceptance of a plea deal for second-degree murder. The agreement resulted in a 35-year prison sentence, which reflected both the severity of his crimes and his cooperation in locating Tricia's body. Investigators successfully recovered her remains from the remote wildlife area where Stephen had directed them, providing closure for the family's agonizing uncertainty about her fate. Circuit Judge Lawrence Merman presided over Stephen's sentencing hearing on September 30, 2016, first determining that Stephen was mentally competent to proceed with the legal proceedings. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, Judge Merman found Stephen guilty of second-degree murder and child neglect, formally imposing the agreed-upon 35-year prison sentence. Stephen received credit for the 130 days he had already served in Martin County Jail while awaiting trial and sentencing. The state prosecution requested significant restitution totaling more than $67,000 to be paid to the Martin County Sheriff's Office to cover the extensive costs of the investigation. This financial aspect highlighted the substantial resources required to solve the case, including the specialized personnel, equipment, and time needed to conduct the search operations, forensic analysis, and complex interrogation process that ultimately led to Stephen's confession. The most remarkable aspect of the entire sentencing hearing was the extraordinary response demonstrated by Tricia's family members. Despite learning the horrific details of Stephen's premeditated murder and the brutal way he had killed their beloved daughter and sister, Tricia's father, David Todd, chose to respond with grace and forgiveness, rather than hatred or demands for maximum punishment. David actually expressed his hope that Stephen could use his time in prison constructively, potentially changing his life through faith and taking advantage of educational opportunities available within the correctional system. This demonstration of forgiveness was particularly striking given the calculated and brutal nature of Tricia's murder and Stephen's attempts to destroy her remains to avoid detection. The scene of David Todd embracing Jack Williams Jr. Stephen's father, created a powerful image of two fathers united in grief. One mourning his murdered daughter, the other mourning his son's transformation into a killer. Even after Stephen's conviction and sentencing, Trisha's family continued demonstrating the same compassion and capacity for forgiveness that had characterized Trisha herself throughout her life. As the legal proceedings concluded, Trisha's family faced the challenge of moving forward while keeping her memory alive. Trisha was laid to rest at the South Florida National Cemetery in Lake Worth, a final resting place that honored her service to the country she had loved and served with distinction during her military career. The military burial provided appropriate recognition for her dedication as an Air Force veteran who had deployed to Kuwait and Iraq in service to her nation. David Todd created a meaningful tribute to his daughter by establishing a small memorial at Beacon Baptist Church in Jupiter, which became a sacred space for the family's ongoing connection to Trisha's memory. Every week without exception, David faithfully visited this memorial, demonstrating the enduring love and devotion that would continue long after the legal proceedings concluded. This weekly ritual provided comfort and a tangible way to maintain his relationship with his deceased daughter. The Todd family's deep Christian faith played a crucial role in helping them navigate the aftermath of Trisha's murder and find meaning amid their profound loss. Rather than becoming consumed by bitterness or focusing solely on the tragedy of losing Trisha, her family made a conscious decision to treasure and celebrate the 30 precious years they had been blessed to share with her. This positive approach to grief reflected the same strength, grace, and faith-centered perspective that had characterized Trisha throughout her life. Her family's response to tragedy embodied the values she had lived by, creating a living testament to her influence and character that extended beyond her death. The most important aspect of moving forward involved ensuring that Faith, who had lost both parents that terrible night, one to murder and one to prison, would be raised with love and strong moral guidance. Faith went to live with Trisha's brother Jonathan Todd and his wife, where she was surrounded by extended family members committed to her well-being and development. In her new home, Faith heard bedtime stories with faith-based themes that connected her to both her mother's memory and the family's spiritual foundation. These stories provided not only comfort, but also a bridge linking Faith to the religious values that had been so important to Trisha throughout her life. Despite the horrific circumstances that brought her to this new living situation, Faith flourished in the care of her extended family, growing into what those who knew her described as a beautiful girl. Her presence provided a source of hope and healing for the entire family, representing the continuation of Trisha's legacy through her daughter's life and future. Trisha's inspiring story of military service, nursing dedication, and unwavering compassion continued to influence and inspire those who had known her, ensuring that her memory would live on through the lives she had touched and the family members committed to honoring her legacy.